Yes, I'm Frances Vivienne Jones. My single name was Frances Vivienne McDermott, born in Thorn Street, Newcastle, which is went as a child, grew up in many places I did live, simply because in those days they were times when families only rented, they didn't own. Poor people, more or less. Lived the very first time in Layman Street. Used to live just down from Cook's Hill School in Layman Street. As a small child, we lived, the terraces are still there, they're balcony terraces where we did live, rented, should I say. And also that I was always, as a small child, very delighted because in those days, Cook's Hill School used to have a band, and I used to love to go up. And I think I would have been any more than 3 or 4. I think more younger than that.
And so your brothers were staying.
I had my brothers left school when they were 12 because, Mum wanted, I didn't have a father, and one worked at night time. There used to be Silverglar people that used to make bread at night. My eldest brother next to me, he used to go and make bread at night time. He'd work, he'd go and do work, and then he'd come home and have an hour's sleep and go and work in a horseshoe factory next day all day.
So where were they? Were they down Newcastle West?
No, they were in Greenway Street. You know where the fish markets are? Well, I lived opposite that in a big house there where the Church of England is at the moment. And I asked the people who used to collect the sharks when I was younger, and they used to bring them in and weigh them. They were contracted by the government to do that. I can remember sitting down in Wickham watching, we sat there at the top of Railway Street. That were Ganinians and they were all there, and we sat on the footpath because the street lights were put on. We sat there nearly all night waiting for the lights to be turned on.
Goodness.
You know, there's such a history written there that, people think, oh, you've got a lot to talk about, but it is.
There is a lot to talk about. So much has happened in the country.
So much has happened in that time. You're used to horse and carts. You're used to the baker. You're used to the milk coming. And we never had any air conditioning or anything. We walked to school when it was 40. I used to walk over from Wickham to Hamilton South to go to school. To Hamilton. Now, you think it's 40 here, a hot day. You think of walking to school when it was 40. Well, when you got there was nothing. If we saw an iceman on the road, even though we were going to Girls' High, as it was thought of in those days, we would ask them to break us some ice. And that's what we had to cool. There are no refrigeration, and there are only a sort of a trolley thing built with gauze either side and a wet sack put over. And that's what you cool things with. So all that people don't believe.
Yeah. So with the cooperative store,
it was down. Well, you'd have to really catch. Oh, you could walk it. It wasn't that far. You know where the dairy farmers are? Well, we lived in Railway Street, which is Railway Street there. So you'd go to the top of the street, and I used to buy. My mother never bought any patterns, or never bought patterns. No, never bought cottons or beads. And I used to just be right to the counter, and the old ladies used to say to me, yeah, or buy my stuff. The brewery was there on the other side, and the co-op store started there and went right along, and then there was a laneway.
Yes. So what do you remember of the co-op store?
Oh, it was a really good store. Well, people used to get the tram into the store from outer suburbs and go and shop and then walk to the top of town. But they sold food. They had an association where you could join it and pay a hospital fee. They had clothing. They had everything. There was nothing really, I would say. The big windows, they would have dress, but people on Thursday nights, you couldn't move really along the footpath because people were getting off the tram and going into the store and then walking uptown.
So the divvy. Do you remember the divvy?
Yes, yes,
So
yeah.
how did that work?
Well, there are certain things had divvy on them. You know, like what do I think? It might have been a piece of clothing, more than a clothing line because it was expensive, but not now. And so yes, they would put that in. That would add up, and then you could pay money in, and that divvy also helped with the financial part of hospital and that. You know, some of that money went into that. Yes, yeah.
So when you lived in Railway Street, did your mum shop at the store?
Yeah, everyone. Well, they used to have delivery people. Yeah. Well, you didn't shop with everything. There were little shops in between. You know, you didn't. The bulk of stuff you bought at the store, definitely, but not all of the stuff because they didn't keep it. And the hotel that one there Bob was playing, that was the Lasagari, and that's still there. And so they used to be the Lasagari. And then when we were children growing up in Railway Street, they used to, you know, we didn't see strange people or people that were crippled. And we used to have a fellow there, he was much older. And when we were young as kids, we all went together. There was never a single person. You all went in a group. You know, I mean, we had one group where one was a deaf and dumb person, and we could speak quite fluently to her simply because playing all together, right? Because I went to Cookshill for a while because my father had died and I was at Girls' High and I knew I would not have, well, my mother would not, we were poor people, enough money to be a solicitor or a doctor or something. And I did my last year, I had to take up 3 years into 1 year to do secretarial work. So that's the story there in that one.
You went to a number of schools from the sounds of it. You went to like state schools.
I went through the Catholic school, went to the Catholic school at Hamilton for a while because I had a little altercation with a nun. I did not have it, but the nun had it. Then I went to Wickham School, as it is now, or, you know, still there. Then I went to, after high school in my days, they used to put it in the paper if you passed to go to a school, and there were only two, and my name was not in the paper. There was only one girl that had a name in the paper that had passed from Wickham School, because mine was a boy, Frances as the boy, not a girl, so I was put in the male section. Till I cried about it and then found out, you know, can't just remember how I did find out.
So was Wickham School a big school?
Which school?
Wickham School? Were there
but still there. So it's still onto Hannell Street, and all that Hannell Street there, all that part from where you came to the sheds, you know, they're still there. Well, that was all a road right through, but a lot of bush, and as time coming up, you know, it was all sort of an alteration here. But it's only in the latter years that has been established, because they're always, I think the hotel now is the modern one, and there's a few things there, shops and high-rise buildings, which were never there before. They were always just bushy. And the trains there used to be a Wickham station, and then then later on it was Honeysuckle, I think it was, in the middle there. Yeah, I can remember all of those there.
So
and
it's
still,
fairly like Hunter Street we know now, and Newcastle and Wickham are basically one and the same. Was there much distinction between Newcastle East and Newcastle West?
Not that I know of. See, when you lived anywhere, we never went a lot of places unless you had to go there. I think the people were more tolerant with people than people are now. You know, now there's this education. When I started to grow up and went to school and Girls' High and times through that, with the students themselves, made a character of, you come from Wickham, and that's where I had And fortunately, I was with Girls High and most of the schools and Boys High, the president of the P&C. So to me, I never have class in my life of thinking. No, there's no class with me. I like people as people. To me, everyone is a person. I'm not a reader. My reading is done by people, looking at them, judging them, and not condemning them. That is my life. Yeah, 40. I left school when I was 4. The intermediate was 14, and I was about 3 or 4 months looking for work because my father had passed away. And I always still think of my father. He used to say to me, and I was always following, basso taps and sweeping the gutter and whatever else. And he used to say to me, you're given a brain and you're given a tongue and you use it. Now, my first job was that DJs came up here as a shoe shop. And they had an ad in the paper from 18 to 23. And I thought, the age doesn't matter to me. So I went, and we lined up from where Lane and Waters are, or DJs at the side, right up to the beach. Oh, people used to try to get work. Work was always, and most were older. But when I went there, they said to me, when I went in, these 3 handsome young men said, how old are you? And I said, only 14 and a half. And they said, I'm sorry, the ad's 18 to 23. And I said, but now look here, I need work and I can do anything. And they looked at each other and I thought, I said I don't care, it's what I think. And anyhow, he said, just go outside and wait. So the line-up come back up that way again. Not all of it, they'd say to some, we don't want you. And you had to be 18. I realised afterwards to serve. Always, to be in retail, you have to be 18. It's a law always. And so the first name called out was mine. But what happened was they kept me because I said I could do anything. And what I used to do, I couldn't serve, but I would give them a drink of water if they wanted a drink of water. I would look after all the stock. I would do all the banking. And I would go every morning at 7 o'clock up to the at the top of the table where the boats come in and find a carrier to bring our stock down. And that when I was 15. So
were there like fashion stores? I know there's like Scott's and...
No, Scott's were old, yes, but they were not. They were very old. I come up from Sydney with Charles Lloyd Jones to buy Scott's. I came up 3 years.
Tell me about that. What was your involvement?
My involvement, I was the private secretary. There were 2. There were Mr. Diamond, the accountant. Oh no, he wasn't. He was a solicitor and his secretary. And there's Charles and myself. And we used to come up to Scott's, Eric Scott, to see Eric Scott. And for 3 years we came up once a year till the last year because there were a lot of strikes and he wouldn't buy it because of the strikes. And then eventually he did. And that's how they bought Scott's.
So what year was that, Viv? Was that?
I think what happened at the time.
Yeah,
it would have been... Yeah.
But he had a role in the purchasing day, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, naturally, if he brought his secretary up, she'd have to be. Yeah. And also Mr. Diamond and his secretary.
So what do you recall of the day? Like what
when we did, we went up to his office and discussed about it, terms and things, which they do in business, which I was used to because I would have plenty of experience. And they would talk about that, then they'd get all the detail, and I would be typing it down, penciling it down or whatever in shorthand. And then he would say, yes, I'll think about it. And so did Mr. Diamond, because he was the man who was advising him. And so Eric Scott would wait to get an answer to know if he was going to purchase the place. And then and after that, When I first went to Sydney, Dudley Webster was a young. He started the same time, but he was in the shoe department, and then he came and managed Newcastle, and he and I remembered each other from when we were younger people.
Okay, so he was the manager of David Jones.
He was the manager Jones in Newcastle at one period, yes, yeah.
So did they keep the staff that'd been with Scott's?
Oh, yes, most of them, yes, oh, yes. Oh, they were like that, DJs, they wouldn't, and they had a lot of other staff, and they had a lot of bitchy scarves. So the only thing I ever found in my life, working with men always from a young person, I found women horrible. I would rather work with a lot of men, and I've heard so many say that. Because if they didn't find out about all your story, they would make it up. And I found that when I first went to John's.
So you felt quite respected by men that you worked for?
Look, men are men. Always. It's their breed, men are men. And we would have, I think there used to be about, how many did we have? Oh, and they were up on the floor with we used to do work for, type and do all the work. Must have been about 12 officers. And at the end of a morning, he'd walk up, want to put his arms around you, want to give you a cuddle, but there were no more than that. And we never said anything. And yet, we laughed, after it was all over, that one had got 18,000 out of DJ because somebody, but we never used to take any notice. They were never familiar enough to feel, or we were stupid, we didn't know, but we never had any. They'd say, I had a bad time last night, the wife was real cranky, or something, very dignified. And they talk about it at the business lines.
There wasn't the political correctness there is today.
Well, I don't know. I think people were more. They were men who would you would be in a room with a man all day with the door closed. And then after that, I became a buyer. So after that, I had 11 years buying.
So was this before you got married?
No, I got married and had my children once they went to school. A very early part, I used to do jobs. But what I did, I was between 3 and 10 when they were little, and we went to school, when they left school, when they were in high school, or going from 6th class to high school. I went and got casual work. I was the first casual in Newcastle with John's silk store. So then I was only there a month and I became a buyer. I travelled all around Australia and to New Zealand, and I have letters from Ireland, Scotland, where I used to buy, and every time that I put an order in, I got a gift. Beautiful mohairs.
So was John's just in Newcastle?
Oh, John's silk store, yes. Yeah. You know where the toilet used to be in that little island? Well, next to that used to be the bank, the Commonwealth Bank, and then in the earlier part was Woolworths. That was when I was much younger. But yes, it was.
So as a buyer, was it unusual for a woman to be a buyer?
No, well, I don't know. See, I had 7 departments.
So what did they sell there, Viv, at John's?
Oh, it was a beautiful store. It was really against DJs at many times. They sold underwear, beautiful underwear. They sold patterns. They sold jewellery, hosiery, material, and linen. And they were in big, it was a fair store. But yes. So I used to go to Melbourne every second week. I'd stay a week. I was there when the Cup was on. I went to New Zealand, particularly. I went to all these big fashion shows, with Myers you see now. Well, they used to have shows like that. So I was always given a dress, and we went to all those.
As a buyer, did you sit through the fashion shows and select?
Oh, definitely. Oh no, I might be given thousands of money, but it had to be split up at times. And jewellery, Jensen's and all those people. Oh, yes, I was buying from them. But a lot of buyers just go and what you do when those fashion things are on, you would sit there and pick out what you thought you could sell. And that is why, and a lot of the doctors' wives in Newcastle would find out when I was going to a certain place and DJs were there and they would say, I want this, could you find something? And I would buy individual pieces, not buy 5 or 6 of it. Race time, you'd buy hats, military, and I always bought them dressed and I would dress them up. And then you'd have coloured stockings. And then in the winter time, you'd have those fashion lacy stockings. So there's lots of things. And I was the first one to bring in the ones to buy in Newcastle, was the toeless ones when they had the hands and toes cut off them. I was the first one that bought in the lacy stockings. But I love fashion. If I went to a fashion house, I'd be absolutely absorbed in whatever they had. And I not only think, John's paid every 7 days. Whatever they bought, they paid no matter how much it was. But DJs would buy stuff they'd never pay for, but they'd leave it in a warehouse. And so if I saw something here I liked better, I'd take it out of that lot and tell them, well, they haven't paid, but I have. So, that was interesting.
It would have been
absolutely fantastic.
Particularly if you liked fashion, if you enjoyed fashion, and then, it would have been such an enjoyable job.
And not only that, you helped your customers because you could say, look, I saw something there, I think it's like you. And I used to buy some very expensive clothing and shawls and underwear. There's a couple of doctors' wives that used to say, I want sexy underwear, and I'd go and buy it wherever it was. But that was the sort of people I wanted stocking. And Mrs. Caldwell, the jewellers, when I used to go buying, my husband, when he used to meet me on the plane at night time, come down and say, I can't even see you, because I used to buy her the purpley stocking, and I'd bring them home for her. So I used to buy a lot of people things that they, people who wanted handkerchiefs to crochet around, nobody bothered about them. But I used to buy those, and a lot of people who used to crochet around them. Yeah. I'm not skiting myself, but if I thought something wanted something and I could get it, I'd get it.
Yeah. And I think Newcastle was that small, the right size sort of city. That they were people who were self-conscious, very women in Newcastle at that stage were very conscious. If I bought something different, or a shawl or something to go out with, or wear suggest stockings, I say, oh yes, but I'm the only one. Or people look at me and say, don't be silly. What did you buy it for? What did you have it for? And anyhow, if someone looks at you and say, oh, that's nice, you haven't regretted paying for it. With a frock or whatever. And I used to sell fur coats, used to go around the farriers, and people that could order coats through there and shawls and stuff. So how long did you work there? Did you work there until it closed?
No. I left just about from the time they changed over to go to Charlestown. I think my buyer that took over for me, they couldn't get buyers enough to cope to keep the stock rolling around. She was only a young one, and I left then at that time.
When Westfield opened.
So that might have been the 70s?
Yes.
Yeah, it would have been.
It all comes together in the 70s.
Yeah.
An infamous character in Newcastle called Black Harris.
Oh, I knew him. My father and he were very friendly. Oh, no, don't talk. Oh. I'm very nervous.
Oh, no, we don't need to talk about
No, she's got.
Well, he used to always wear a rose, and he always wore a hat with the front up, smartly dressed. And when we lived in Newcastle, and my father was a bit like me, he talked to her, and what he used to do is to go to, I'll tell the part about him, when I used to meet him, my father meet him, I'd grab on his hands like this because I was so frightened. I was only tiny, I can still remember. And he always wore a red rose there. And also there was a taxi service here. The first taxi service was Swans. And they were very social people. So what Black Harris used to do is to go to the hotel at night time, drug them up, and Swans, the taxi people, who were so very social, would drug them and take them down to the boat. And they used to take them, yes. But Black Harris, my father knew because I used to clunch into his hands, and he used to put his hand on my head and say, "Hey, the girlie." Oh, I used to think, I wish you'd keep that hand somewhere else, not on my head. It wasn't every day, but it was down more around Mackey's Lane, you know, that's where we were at one time
So
there.
apparently he used to go to the Black Diamond Hotel.
That's right, yeah.
And it was that they called Shanghai, where
He called it blackbirding then.
Blackbirding, and they'd sort of recruit, or not even
They
recruit.
did, they picked him up and...
Old people.
That's right. Oh, I knew him of quite well. Oh, yeah.
But see, the taxi,
Taxi was Swans, and he was the fame. They were always looked upon as the social people, and they had a big, long car. And I encountered one of the younger sons, or one of the younger generation, and I used to say to him, "Well, I hope you scrub yourself, because a lot of people were picked up by you people." And so I don't know.
So do you think your father was scared of Black Harris as well?
No, they were friends. See, my father was like me. It wouldn't matter who it was. He'd have a talk. And he knew him by his name because he used to see him down at the West End, like near Mackey's Lane. At Mackey's, where Mackey's were, and that was called Mackey's Lane. So that, no, I mean, we didn't meet him every day. That would be once in, I can't think, about a month but yes, and I always used to stop my father and talk to him. He was smartly dressed in beautiful clothes, and he used to, as I say, talk to my father. Sometimes he would go into the hotel on the corner there where Mackey's Lane is, and I'll tell you who was there also after that, Gingies, best and less, and they were Russians, and I was a child living at that lane at Cook's Hill, in a lane there, and they had 4 daughters and 2 sons, huge people, and that now is best and less. Younger,
No.
but that is, as I say, Black Harris, yes. I remembered him because he was black and had that red rose there in the front and the hat turned up.
Depression. Like, can you remember much around that time of the Great Depression?
Oh, yes, people were poor. We know you went to school without breakfast. People was poor. We had clothes made from clothes that people might have, your family, and my grandma used to send clothes down from Armadale, and my mother was a sewer, of course, a very good sewer. She would make pants for the boys, and in those days she used to buy flour in a flour bag, and Mum used to wash it and line the pants with that. She used to make raincoats. She'd make it out of unbleached calico, put linseed oil on them. And so there were all sorts of things that were depression.
Yeah.
And you'd see people, a lot of people wouldn't help them. But if you were in a street and you had a teaspoon of something left over, you would find somebody that wanted a teaspoon of something, whatever. Sugar, flour, whatever. That teaspoon would make up part of what they wanted to make a meal. And they were all big families.
Together. That would have brought the community.
But everyone was. Look, if anyone was sick, they'd go and help them all together. And another thing, coming along the sand in where the fish markets are, the seamen used to go to Newcastle and they'd drop their beer bottles. Across this side of the road here used to be they bought bottles and strew, and we used to collect the bottles and take them and get a halfpenny for, I think I used a half a dozen or something.
So with the opportunities for women to go to university when you were growing up was
Couldn't afford
extremely rare.
Yes. Well, that was the only thing. I was never one at university, unfortunately. Just as well, I might have been bored.
Look, it sounds as if you were such a people person and you enjoyed, you weren't a big reader, but you learnt from life and experience.
You know what I do about reading? I read, turn the book, open the book, Len used to buy me books to read and we were courting. So I used to open a part of the front of the book and then I'd close it and go to the middle and read the middle and read the end so I could tell him I've read the book. And he used to think,
Probably thought you were a speed reader.
I've done that before. Yes, life has changed. People have changed. But it's not been now. It's been over a time because, as you know, from the time I grew up to times not fully now, but people are different. Children, if it's not the article in fashion, we don't want it. It's a throwaway world now, isn't it? You know, garments, you think, oh, I'll finish with that, I'll put it in a bag and go to the op shops and all that. But I do say that change is that people connecting people. Yeah. But no, I feel in my long life, that 101 and the little bit more, life is so different. So different.